Thank you very much for this opportunity. I'm from the Department of Rural Development and Land Reform. And basically I want to share with you a few slides around the National Rural Youth Service Corps, which is a skills development program that is intended to assist rural youth that need to get a qualification. I am going to look at those following issues, quickly deal with the background, workplace integrated learning, a bit of theory that I want to share with you, discuss the NARISEC program details, what this program is all about, talk a bit about the stipend, the travel and the accommodation issues that we deal with, and then I want to go a bit into some of the elements that we deal with in the NARISEC program, looking at orientation, induction, life skills, youth leadership development, and then the skills development strategy that we follow, and the learning programs that we offer. And then I want to conclude by speaking about some of the challenges that we face in finding the suitable workplace integrated component for these youth. NARISEC started in 2010. For those that are students of public administration, you would have remembered that in 2009 was the first time when South Africa got an independent Department of Rural Development. Before, rural development as a function was divided into different government departments, and in 2009 was the first time that we got a Department of Rural Development. Now, one of the elements of the Department of Rural Development was to look at infrastructure development and also at enterprise and industry development. And after about a year of working in those two areas, we began to realize that the young people in the rural areas is really sitting at home, and there is very little to stimulate them to become economically active and to become students and to get a qualification. And that is then where the NARISEC program came from. We started on the 1st of September. We recruited just under 8,000 young people, and at that stage it was a brand new program. Now typically, like we do things in this country, we first get the youth and then we decide what to do with them. So in 2010 we really started running around, and I think as one of the key partners, the FET colleges, or the TVET colleges as they are called now, was one of the key implementing partners of the NARISEC program. So we were running down from one FET college to the next to try and get them to absorb these students into their colleges. Our first policy was approved in August of 2012, so it took us basically 2 years to develop a proper NARISEC policy and also then unpack the different components that we want to be part of this program. And I want to say at the outset, the selection is not at the smartest, the cleverest youth. It's not like the typical academic kind of recruitment that we do, the highest matric, the highest this, the highest that. We literally focused at the poorest households. So we would do profiling in a community where we would have projects as rural development, and based on those profiling we would select the poorest households and then take one young person from each of those poor households. So that was the methodology that we followed. So it was very much an intervention for youth, but also it became a poverty alleviation mechanism. In October of 2014, after we were about 4 years old, we did our first critical analysis of the NARISEC program. And we had done an internal M&E report, asking questions around what worked, what does not work, looking at what the young people say. And interesting, and I think one of the colleagues made a comment earlier about the youth and the kind of expectations that they have. If you ask young people what they want, they are very honest in what they want. And if you give them what they want, they are still not happy. They still complain. And in our consultative sessions with the young people, that was for us a very important part of reviewing the NARISEC program, so that we can make sure that we actually address the needs that the young people raise with us. It was in 2014, the times that National Treasury started cutting budgets, so we were under severe budgetary constraints, and we had to look at cost-saving mechanisms. So that became a very important part of redesigning this NARISEC program, so that we can make sure that the program is sustainable. And we really reached the point where we asked the question, can we continue with NARISEC? Is this program sustainable? What is the impact that we're having in the rural areas? Are we making a difference? And that was the question that we really looked at that stage. This resulted in a revised policy, and the parts that I'm going to present to you in the following slides is really the way that we operate NARISEC at the moment, the way that we are implementing it as of today. Before we go into NARISEC itself, I just want to share with you some interesting theory that I picked up in a World Bank report, termed World Bank Report on Jobs, dated 2013. And most of what I'm saying is around page 269. You'll have to squibble around a bit to get everything, but that's more or less the part of the book where you will find it. What that report is saying is that the evaluation of training programs shows that positive benefits are not guaranteed, and that program costs can be substantial. Now, this was a report that they've done. I would not give you the exact number, but it was around 40 countries that participated in this report. So it was quite a comprehensive study that they did. And I think that is a very important element that for us that is involved in the training world should understand, that it could be a lot of money that we put into the training, but the benefits is not always as significant as we want it to be. When programs are well conceived and implemented, however, they benefit those furthest away from a job most. They benefit those that is furthest away from the job most. In other words, the individual that is already trained and qualified will benefit much less from training than a person that has a very little skill base from which to work. In Latin American countries and in some of what they call the transition economies, such as Romania, youth and women record significantly higher success rates from training than middle-aged men. Some design features are critical for success. The integrated programs that include both on-the-job and classroom components were the ones that were most effective. So the ones where there was a classroom and an on-the-job component was the ones that were most successful, especially in the Latin American countries. Training for job seekers now often follow this integrated model, sometimes with complementary services such as life skills training and counseling. Such combinations increase the success rate of the specific training intervention. The Jovines program in Latin America, which combines life skills and technical training with work experience, are case in point. In Colombia, Jovines and Action has increased employability of trainees with an estimated rate of return of 13.5 to 25% for female participants. Now, for us in NARISEC, and I'm sure for all of you that is involved in the training area, that 13.5 to 25% is incredibly low. It sort of raises this question, is training then really the tool that is effective, and is it really making a contribution? But those are sort of the success percentages that is attached to many of the training programs that was assessed in that World Bank study. An interesting factor also in Tunisia, the inclusion of entrepreneurship training in education curricula improved participants' optimism about the future. They didn't say they make them more effective or more likely to find a job or more likely to find a business, establish a business. They made them more optimistic about the future. And that is perhaps something that we also need to look at in our country, because our young people generally is not optimistic about their own futures. In northern Uganda, participation in a comprehensive intervention that combined grants, vocational training, life skills, and psychological counseling was successful in increasing community participation. Now, if we look at the next slide, it gives us a bit of an analysis in terms of the kinds of training that is most effective. And the first bar on the graph is indicating in-classroom training only. In-classroom training only, that specific bar, which is actually giving us a negative result of minus 0.15. The next one is workplace and classroom training. No, sorry, this is workplace only, is also not so effective. But the moment when you combine the two, you can see that immediately there is a positive result that is coming. And then even more significant for me is that the last bar, which is saying that in classroom training, but also combining with all these other services, which is then the life skills, the counseling that goes with that, some of the elements that were mentioned. So that seems to, according to this particular study, the way that we need to structure our training programs. Now, the reason why I'm raising this is that was the methodology that we followed in designing this NARISEC program. Firstly, our recruitment criteria is from 18 to 25. When we started in 2010, we took it 18 to 35. And we found that the youth between 35 and 25 is really not interested in the kind of things that we offer in the NARISEC program. So the dropout rate was extremely high, especially when you go to a TVET college that's far away from home and the wife and the kids is sitting very far away. They lose interest very quickly in what we did. So we changed the age intake from 18 to 35 down to 18 to 25. The first NARISEC, in 2010, we started with a grade 10, standard 8 qualification. We changed that to a grade 12, simply because we found that the ease with which the grade 10s find the programs in the TVET colleges is really problematic. In most of the programs that we offered, there is a bit of a technical element, mathematics or something like that, and we then found that the grade 10 youth generally found it very difficult to be successful in completing. So we changed to grade 12. If there's extenuating circumstances, if there's, for example, a community like we have a specific area in the Eastern Cape where we found that there's virtually no youth with the grade 12, we then look at lowering the level. But we prefer to take the grade 12 youth. Our recruitment period is 2 years, and we recruit 3 times a year, which is March, July, and August. Now, this is the NARISEC program sort of summarized in one slide. Here we do the selection process. As I mentioned before, we will do a profiling of a particular community, identify the poorest households in that particular community, and then identify youth from those households. So we advertise, there's an advert, and the youth apply, so it's a voluntary process. We then take the youth, we have a college in Tabanshu. For those of you who don't know where Tabanshu is, it's about 80 km outside of Bloemfontein. We have a college that can take about 1,200 youth, and we then take them there for firstly a 3-week period. During that 3-week period, we deal with the enrollment issues, where we explain to them what NARISEC is all about. They sign a contract, and in those contracts are a number of issues that they need to agree to, which I will come to in a short while. They then go through this career guidance and life skills process, which is a basically different times that they spend in a 14-day period around life skills, and also then explaining to them the different career options that is available to them. Being rural development, obviously we look at those areas that is relevant to rural development. We don't do things that is now outside of the rural development scope. But it's once again, it's a voluntary process. And then the youth then after that start with the youth leadership program, which is a period of 12 weeks. So this part will take about 3 weeks, and then after that, they will then start with the youth leadership program. Now we have 2 youth leadership programs. The one is presented by the Department of Defense, which is either in Kimberley or in Saldanha Naval Base, where the youth then go through this 12-week program where they undergo strict disciplinary processes. There's a noisy corporal and a sergeant that drills them up and down. They wake up very early in the morning. They must make their bed and wash the floor and iron and all of those things that our young kids of today normally do not do. The comment made about the sewing, yes, they learn how to sew as well. So they must fix their own buttons and all of those kind of things. So in that 12-week period, you literally see the youth arriving in this very not nice facility normally, where they complain about the bed and the food and these ugly military people that are screaming at them the whole time. And then 12 weeks later, you cannot get them away from that place. Because in that 12 weeks, they've learned dignity, they've learned respect, and they've learned basic things that they love. So when you greet them on the last day, on the final parade, they want to say to you, I don't want to leave, I want to stay here. And that really is the kind of response that we get. And it's not from one or two people. It's significant, the number of happiness that you see in that group when they are done with that program. That's the one leadership training. The requirement for the Department of Defense is that you need to be medically fit. Now, it's not the same medical standard as you need to be for a soldier, but at least you need to be able to run and drill and do those kind of things. For those youth that are then found to be not medically fit, we keep them in the Tabanshu College, and we then use the Moteo TVET College to offer them a number of life skill modules and other modules which I will show to you in a short while, what some of the content is that they actually go through. So in this part, literally we'll start with a young person that's unemployed that will go through all of these different steps, and by the time that they are there, you find a different character of person. They're motivated, they are positive, they've made a career choice, and the next step for them then is to go and do community service. Now that community service is a general kind of community service. It's not yet specific to the qualification that they will do. You will find some of them in police stations, in hospitals, in old age homes, in schools, in many areas in rural spaces. And this is a place that is close to their home. So the youth begin to learn for a 2-month period that they need to plow back. They get monitored. They fill in a sheet that needs to be signed by the supervisor every day, that they do report. If they don't report, we cut the stipend that we pay them. So there's quite a strict kind of methodology. And obviously, what we also use the community work for is to see whether this youth will be able to cope with the skill phase, which is then the next step that they go through. So after the 2 months community service, they then go to one of our country's TVET colleges. We also use a number of other institutions like DUT and so on, where we also train the youth. The majority providers that we have is the national skills development institutions that we have. We at this stage have not used the private sector yet for this kind of training. It's everything done through government skills institutions. Now, I will talk about the skills training in a while, but then part of that is then the workplace part, where normally it's a 3 to 4 month theory, and then after that it then is a workplace where there is a formal workplace curriculum that they have to go through. They get a logbook that needs to be signed by the workplace where they do the training, and then part of that then builds up the POE that they submit for the determining whether they qualify. I think it's the same in most of our academic institutions. So there's the one area that then is workplace integrated. We then take the youth back to Tabanshu, and that is then when we start with this workplace readiness program. So I'm definitely going to come and visit some of the colleagues and make sure that the processes that we follow with workplace readiness is up to standard, and that it is as effective as it should be. Because that is one of the key problems that we find, is that the youth do not really want to work. They want the qualification, but they do not really want to go to a workplace. And then they go to the next community service. This is 2 months, and this is 5 months. And this is now a specific workplace where they need to go and do their community service. So this is not general like the first one, which is the police or the hospital or a school or whatever. This is the workplace where they've done the skill. They then need to go and volunteer themselves to go and do community work at one of those companies. So normally it will be the company where they've done the practical for the skills. They still get the stipend, so they can then offer themselves free of charge to that particular company so that they can plow back. And once again, it's that serving the community, which is the emphasis of that particular process. And then we have a final contact session with them at the Tabanshu College, and then they exit the NARISEC program after a 2-year period. I'm not going to spend too much time on these details. I'm sure the presentations will be made available to you. But essentially, we pay the youth 60 Rand a day for 22 days, which is 1,320 Rand a month. And then should they do community service and they don't pitch up, and they're not as active in the community as they should be, then that gets halved. So then they only get that month 660. And that is normally a very good incentive to get them back into community service. Part of what they are expected to do is to give 50% of their stipend to their families. And as I mentioned before, we recruit them in rural communities. So the families know what this contract is. It's not like they sign a contract with us and the families don't know about this 50%. So there's strong pressure on them to get that 50%. Obviously, we can't monitor it, but every time that the minister sees the youth, he asks them, do you still give 50%? Yes, Minister, we do. So it's that theme that is still recurring there. But whether it happens, I don't know, but I pray that it do happen. I'm going to skip some of this just to save time. In terms of the orientation, that first 3-week period that we spend in the college, we do the orientation and induction, life skills, a careers day, enterprise development, community service, and then youth development activities. And everything is done very much the way the youth want to do it. We use NARISEC youth to actually facilitate this process. So there's a number of youth that we trained into the ETDP process to actually be able to facilitate all of these things. So it's not officials or lecturers, it's young people themselves that facilitate these processes. So it's done very much on the way and the language that they understand it to work. So it's done very interactive. In terms of the overview of NARISEC, a policy, there's a contract, there's a code of conduct, there's a disciplinary code. They must understand what National Youth Service is all about, understand what is active citizenship and personal budgeting, youth development paradigm, values, beliefs, etc., etc. In terms of the life skills, these are the programs that we are looking at. Personal development, goal setting and planning, time management, diversity, problem solving, communication, health and wellness, and teamwork. We've picked these because we felt they were the relevant ones to the kind of population that we are working with. And there's more coming. We will definitely add more things around sexual behavior and pregnancies and those kind of things that we feel is also having a significant need. But at least this is a very solid base to work from. In terms of the youth leadership program, these are the kinds of things that the youth do in terms of the Moteo TVET program. Engage in sustained oral communication and evaluation, evaluate spoken text, accommodate audience and context needs in oral communication, and then you will see project team management, working in a team and so on. So it's a very practical kind of thing, and when the youth leave, they are well empowered with practical tools, how to be active in a team and how to manage themselves in a project. Now in terms of the different skills areas that is covered in NARISEC, we've looked at the NSDS 3 and identified all of the priority areas in rural development as well as provincial growth and development strategies, all of the official documents that is there that can indicate what the needs in a province may be. In some provinces, for example, mining is a skill shortage, in other agriculture, other tourism and so on. So we've done all of those research to actually then get to the point where we can identify what are the most relevant skills programs for these young people. In other words, once they are skilled, what is the likelihood of them getting a job? Because there's areas there where you know this is a scarce skill, but it's so scarce that you can't even find a job if you have the skill. So those are the ones that we try to avoid. We then identify the relevant learning programs, and when we then do the career counseling with youth, that is then the things that we offer to them. So based on our research and based on the kind of projects that we do as rural development and the partnerships that we have, that is then how we identify what these relevant skills areas are. And we then implement a quarterly and annual review to make sure that we stay relevant with the kind of programs that we offer. In terms of the alignment with all the 18 SIPs, which I also agree with Professor, it hasn't happened yet. We trained a large number of youth in construction, and those youth are still waiting for those construction opportunities. So we need to be very careful how we develop the strategies so that we don't just get onto the bandwagon of prioritizing, but then when the reality comes in the end of the day and we need to get the opportunity, then we find it difficult for those youth to get their actual jobs. And these are some of the learning programs that we offer. Agribusiness, animal production, meat production, mixed farming, plant production. You'll see a lot of agriculture, and the reason for that is that as rural development we are busy with 44 agri-parks in each district in the country. So most of the youth that we have now will be linked to those agri-parks, and if there's, for example, mixed farming, then that's the activity that the youth will fulfill in those projects. So many of the youth that we have, especially the latest ones, will be working for rural development in the projects that rural development is having, so that they can become entrepreneurs. There's also tourism and hospitality, which is one of the very good qualifications we did through DUT, where professional cookery, where most of these youth are now working in the Eastern Cape, in all the government hospitals. You'll get food from Narisek youth that have actually prepared those food. So school administration, also a very popular program, especially in Limpopo, where they need administrative capacity in the schools, and these youth then provide the service there. Renewable energy, solid waste, auto body repair, engineering fabrication, where I want to talk about finding workplaces for those youth, because it's very difficult to allow them to do their practical training. Office administration, clothing, garment manufacturing, wholesale, retail, and so on. So these are some of the things that we do as part of our skills programs. Sorry, this is now going the wrong way. Right. Talking a bit about the challenges that we find with the work placement of young people. It really is extremely difficult. The system that our TVET colleges has adopted is that they don't offer the workplace automatically. In other words, they will accept a student in a certain area, but it's not guaranteed that that student will go through the practical part at that particular college. So they will offer the theory, but then that student is on his own or her own to then find a workplace where they can get the prescribed practical experience. And that is a significant challenge. Some colleges do assist youth, and when we have an agreement with the college, we make sure that it's included that they must find the work placement as well. And I think it's a process of transforming the TVET sector to actually make sure that it happens. But it is a massive challenge. The willingness of employers to participate is definitely not there. And I think where we saw some of the old employers that used to be massive in training, we don't see them taking the same number of youth. Whether it's the economic cycle that is on a recession, I don't know. But I think generally there's an unwillingness of employers to participate in skilling the youth. Especially for us with young people from rural areas, there are some areas where you literally scout for weeks and you don't find even one employer that is willing to take on some of these youth. When you find a workplace, it's very seldom that you find a qualified mentor. And I don't mean now a person with a qualification in mentorship, but I mean a person that is significantly skilled to be able to mentor this young person in their qualification. And the youth are very quick to say, but I now have this qualification, what do you have? And if you, for example, in the construction industry where you get a bricklayer with 40 years of experience that is a perfect bricklayer, to that young person, that one can't read, can't write, and I don't listen to you. And those are unfortunately some of the things that we have to correct. So we start in Tabanshu already preparing the youth for that kind of thing, so that they begin to understand when a person is really skilled or when a person is not skilled. Obviously, the cost involved in accommodating the youth while they undergo the training is huge. Many of the industries that we find in the Midrand, Joburg area. So a young person from somewhere in the Eastern Cape, you have to find a space for them to stay. You have to transport them here. You have to assist them with the adjustments in terms of the different cultures that is here. So it becomes a very difficult process for that young person to actually get that particular qualification in the end of the day. And then, like we mentioned before, the workplace readiness of the young people is sometimes really very problematic. The first thing some youth do, they start negotiating for an additional payment. Before they even started one day of work, they negotiate for money. And I think that really is a serious problem. And even if you prepare the young people for, you only get the stipend. They still organize themselves, they find a shop steward at the other workplace, they begin to toy, and then suddenly it becomes a very complicated process. So we need to change that, because otherwise we are going to offer youth the most fantastic opportunities, but they're going to miss that because they have other things in their mind. Not, I want to get this qualification, I want to get this skill. And I think that is the area where we need to begin to focus. Unrealistic expectations of young people. If you're in construction, you need to start by digging the foundations. The youth refuse to do that. I'm skilled now, I'm not digging trenches. So it's that unrealistic expectation that is there that we need to understand. If you're in the construction industry from time to time, you need to dig a foundation. And you cannot be a builder if you don't do that. So we need to instill that from the onset so that the youth can understand that. And then the quality of the workplace experience sometimes is also very bad, where we have these promises from employers that they will offer the youth the most wonderful experience, but then that is not happening. The youth will sit, they will not be allowed to go onto the site, they will get a difficult supervisor that do not expose them to what they are supposed to be exposed to, and that then becomes a waste of time. For us as government, a waste of money, and then for the youth, a waste of time. And those are the things that the young people complain about. So I think from our perspective, workplace learning, I think if you look at the theory, and if we look at the design of the NARISEC program, we believe that that is the way to go. We believe that workplace integrated learning should be and will remain a part of the NARISEC program. And we can see the difference if a youth comes from a good workplace training and the kind of skill that they can do. In the Northwest, for example, there was an enterprise creation project in the construction industry where they did it very nicely. They let the youth organize themselves into co-ops, so there would be about 4 or 5 youth in a co-op, and they would give each co-op one house to build. Just one. When you are done with that one house, you get 2 houses to build. When you're done with the 2 houses, you get 5 houses to build. And in the process, these young people began to sort of select themselves. So if I was in a co-op and I'm a bit lazy, they will kick me out very quickly. So you'll see a new co-op. And eventually now, from 4 or 5 in a co-op, they've established a co-op of 22 people that were awarded a tender to build 450 houses. So that is the kind of power that you have if you mentor and you manage the youth correctly. Unfortunately, those others that have been sort of worked out of their co-op, you know, it's a loss for us. As a program, it's a failure. But at least we can see that there's this massive co-op that is now making for themselves a significant amount of money. One of them told me that the stipend that you pay as NARISEC is not even enough to cover my cell phone fees now. So that is the kind of success that is possible out there. So Program Director, thank you very much. I think this is what I wanted to share.
The University of Johannesburg. Rethink, reinvent.